You're listening to the official podcast of the Libertarian Party of Georgia. Learn about local issues, meet candidates, and find out what we're doing to bring more options to Georgia voters. Now here's your host, Brent Hilburn.
Welcome to our next episode of the Georgia LibertyCast. This is going to be our legislative wrap-up show for 2018. Joining me in studio are Ryan Thomas Graham, the Vice Chair of the Libertarian Party of Georgia and candidate for Public Service Commission Seat 3.
Hey, everybody.
And Tim Smith, Libertarian Party of Georgia Executive Committee member and our Public Policy Director.
Hello.
Welcome, gentlemen. This is our show that we do after the legislative session's over to discuss particular bills that are important to libertarians and also give you an idea of what our legislature's doing. For those of you who don't know, our legislative session here in Georgia is 40 days, thank goodness. And the vast majority of bills, unfortunately, are passed within the last week of those 40 days. This year, our legislature passed 92 bills on the final day, 92. So one of the people involved with the party, Tim, was instrumental in putting together our Public Policy Committee and had a lot to do down at, our committee had a lot to do down at the legislature this year. So I want Tim to tell us about some of our 2018 achievements and how LP of Georgia was involved.
Okay. Well, I first want to give a shout out to all of the team members of the Public Policy team. Special shout out goes to Ted Metz, our chair, Lori Williams, Ryan's beautiful wife, Ryan Graham, sitting right next to me.
You're welcome.
David, who is no longer with us, but we miss him dearly.
He's alive.
I know. I can't wait to see him at the convention. And Josh. So public policy, really interesting story. I don't know if we really want to jump into it, how I came about being a member of the public policy team. But it started off, Ryan and I were talking, and we were like, civil asset forfeiture really sucks. It's a really sucky thing.
To put it mildly, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just gross, as Ryan would say. I would say it's criminally vulgar, but Ryan would say it's gross. And that rolled into going to attending public safety meetings, city council meetings. Lori spoke before city council, right? Mm-hmm. Ted, of course, has been speaking for a good minute. So that's how it started for me, was attending city council meetings, public safety meetings, and that got us really involved with two issues starting off. It was cannabis, 1 ounce or less of cannabis, just a citation. We did win that. Kudos.
Yeah.
Atlanta. So we got that knocked out. And then also this year we had a win with cash bail, another big issue that we tackled. Want to give a special shout out to Libertarian Party of Atlanta for all of their great and awesome support. Now, regarding what we've done this year in the state legislative session, the Libertarian Party of Georgia is part of a partnership, several advocacy organizations within the state, and our partners are mostly attorneys, which comes in handy because these bills are really, really like legalese to the max. It's like, instead of just saying the, it's henceforth unto. It takes forever.
And you're going to hear that in a minute when I start introducing the titles of some of these bills. You're going to hear exactly what Tim's talking about.
Yeah, it's really crazy. So we want to give a shout out to all of our partners in the partnership. They've been a great help. The partnership, special shout out to Marissa Dotson. Woo, Marissa Dotson. Marissa Dotson, ACLU, Georgia Appleseed, Georgia Justice Project. The list goes on. Literally, it's a list that's really long. But we want to give a special shout out for them. So the partnership decided that we were going to tackle several bills, several pieces of legislation legislation, excuse me. The first bill that we decided that we were going to tackle is cash bail. That was an issue that we believed that we would get traction on. And the interesting story about cash bail, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these bills are introduced by the governor, and he does that because through the governor's ad hoc council. And their formal name is the Georgia Council on Criminal Justice Reform. And the council consists of judges, lawyers, there's a sheriff that's a member, there's a state senator, and these guys get together in a room and they decide on what they want to advance as far as criminal justice reform. And one of the bills that they decided that they wanted to pass was SB 407. They decided that, and SB 407, in case you're not aware or you're unaware, it is a bill that is to reform cash bail in the state of Georgia. Excuse me. So that was one of the things that they wanted to see change. They wanted to see that if you're, for instance, here in Georgia, which is really weird, you can be arrested for a offense that doesn't carry any jail time. So one of those offenses is you can be arrested for jaywalking. Really, really absurd. And we know here in Atlanta that there were homeless people that were arrested for loitering. Won't get into the long story about that, but the law enforcement has found many ways to arrest a person, even though the offense doesn't carry any jail time. So the council, the ad hoc council, got together and they said, it's really weird. It's funny. It's silly that here in the state of Georgia, you can actually be arrested for jaywalking. We probably should tackle that, because what is the point of arresting someone for a crime where there's no actual victim involved? They didn't say it like that, but Libertarian in me says
we understand that language.
Yeah, if there is no victim, there is no crime.
No victim, no crime.
Yeah. So the public policy team, we worked with the partnership to push for SB 407 to be passed. That was a great win for us. There are other pieces of legislation. Other pieces of legislation that we are fighting against. We won't get into that because we don't have enough time, but we do want to give a shout out and implore everyone listening or watching us that if you have any inclination of this really sucks, send me an email, tim.smith@lpgeorgia.com, and we will get you connected with your local affiliate so you can jump in the fight and help.
Awesome. So the Public Policy Committee was very busy during that 40-day session. Very busy. Here's what we've done. Each one of us has picked out some bills from this past session, and we've made a list here, and we're going to go through them one at a time and discuss them. And Ryan submitted a few bills. So Ryan, HB 505, a bill to end civil asset forfeiture. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so the great thing about HB 505 is how simple it is, right? It's 2 lines crossed out and another one added. So basically it gets rid of a bunch of verbiage at the top of the ordinance, the original ordinance or the original law that says that the court can throw out, or that the court can put civil forfeiture proceedings, they can stay them for good cause. Gets rid of that, just says they will do it. So that's the first part of it. And then it also says that it will stay. They'll stay the forfeiture until any sort of conviction. So that means that a person has to be actually convicted of the crime. They have to, go to court, be convicted of the crime, be called guilty, and then they can start proceedings to take their stuff.
So what's the current law say?
Oh, so right now, basically, they have a choice. They can take the stuff before somebody's been convicted of a crime. So if you're driving through Cobb County, I think Cobb County actually has a budgetary line item in their budget that says they're going to raise this much money through this law, and you have a briefcase with maybe $10,000 or something, right? You just made a big withdrawal because you're going to go make a cash purchase of a car. Right. Something where you have a lot of money, right? So if the Cobb County police pull you over and they say, oh, you, sir, don't look like you should have $10,000 cash, it's obviously being used for something illegal, they just take it. They'll just take the money. and they can let you go. They don't have to charge you with any crime. They don't have to charge you with any crime. They don't have to wait until a conviction. They just get that money. And then you actually have to go through the court system and fight for your money back. And you actually have these weird court cases where the money in this case, it would be like the U.S. versus $10,000 and some change. And money, an object doesn't have the same rights as you. So typically what they do is they say that it's guilty until proven innocent. And so that's it throws the whole court system on its head and puts you at a very big disadvantage, and you have to fight for your money back, which is ridiculous if you're not convicted of a crime, especially.
So what's the status of HB 505 right now?
HB 505 got zero traction. It didn't make it out of committee. And it's a shame, really. I think that there is, on both sides of the aisle, I know federally, and I think on the statewide, there is interest in getting this law passed, because I think everybody can look at it and say, hey, the Fourth Amendment doesn't allow you to take people's property without due process, and this very clearly does that. So I think that there is a little bit of, there's interest in getting this done. Well, there's interest in it being done. There's not as much interest in getting it done, which is a shame. And I think that libertarians need to be, shouting from the mountaintops about civil asset forfeiture, because it's completely unconstitutional.
Excellent. So that's something that the Libertarian Party will be working with our Public Policy Committee and also our advocates to get this bill moving forward, get it out of committee. And at least get a vote on it so we can see where our legislators stand. Yeah,
and I'm hoping that our candidates are really talking about it on the campaign trail and making sure that it is an issue that's on the public's, the front of their brain, so that they're thinking about this, and really forcing all the other candidates to talk about their position on this, because once it becomes a popular issue and people realize it, then it'll get done. But until then, it'll just languish in committee.
Right. I want to talk about one of my bills since Ryan's bill segued right into mine. That's SB 336. That is where the GBI can have a subpoena issued without notifying the subscriber for production of your electronic communications. So basically what that says is, the GBI, with the approval of one person in the entire state, that's the Attorney General, one person in the entire state decides whether that's legitimate or not, and then the GBI can issue a subpoena for all your electronic records. That means your phone calls, your emails, and they don't have to notify you about it.
So the court doesn't have to actually approve it? There's no judge?
The judge will issue the subpoena only in the sense that the Attorney General signs off on it. But what you do is you build a structure that will allow it to, over time, like we know what government does, over time it can erode, and then it can, and other things can be added very simply. Right now, it's only for specific electronic communications in specific cases. But that's how laws work. They always start out with the legislature always has a good purpose for it, but then in the end, it always morphs into something else. And of course, if you agree with it today because your team is in charge, you may not necessarily want the other team, having the same levers when that happens.
Well, and has there been any discussion around that on how many jumps you can make? So say you get a subpoena for person A and they're making correspondence with person B. How much of person B's?
No, there's no end once the subpoena begins.
Awesome.
There's no end. So it can and
sarcasm
and you know nothing about it. You know nothing. You're not notified. So no,
you're unconstitutional.
Yes, you know nothing about it. So in essence, it's the equivalent of what the NSA does.
Yeah.
They can have all your communications. So yeah, I mean that's something to watch. Now, as of this recording, none of these bills have been signed by the governor. None. So there's time for us to appeal to the governor to veto these bills or, some of them are legitimate and need to become law. So we do have time for that. So Tim also submitted a list, and Tim talked about SB 407, which was the criminal justice bill. Tim, tell us about SR 146, Marcy's Law.
Okay, so Marcy's Law, which is a resolution that was passed in the Senate. I was going to bring some aluminum foil because part of me feels that in order for me to discuss Marcy's Law, I may have to wear my tinfoil hat. But I really don't feel that way because Marcy's Law is very, very scary. Here in Georgia, it's simply a resolution, but if we look, we can see that throughout the nation, Marcy's Law has been gaining traction in other states. So in other states, not so much here in Georgia, the resolution that passed, but in other states, the way this law reads is that it broadens the definition of what a victim is. So Ryan is standing right next to me. Let's say I don't really like Ryan for some reason, and I punch him in the nose. That's assault, simple assault. Now, Marcy's Law expands the definition that not only is he the victim, but his family, let's say Brent is his uncle or brother. Brent now is also a victim of this crime. So it expands the definition of a crime so that the victim and the victim's relatives no longer have to, and this is a big one, sit down. Let's take a moment. So we know that part of due process is that you have to be able to confront your accuser. Is that not the definition of due process?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Isn't that like the bedrock of justice, of our criminal justice system, that if I accuse you of something, you should be able to confront me? That is part of our Constitution. Well, Marcy's Law takes that away. Marcy's Law states that if you are the victim, you do not have to participate in the defendant's deposition of you. So I then can't take my attorneys and I can't then depose Ryan and Brent because they are victims. So this is a very scary thing if this ever gains traction here in Georgia as it has in other states, because we're looking at a dwindling. Is that the right word?
Dwindle? I don't know.
Oh, well.
Finish
Dwindling.
Dwindling. We will dwindle down.
Dwindle. You're right.
Is it? Okay,
Dwindle.
We are dwindling down. Email me the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Please. So we are looking at our rights being crushed, and this is their battle cry. You gotta do it for the victims. And we understand as Americans that what is it they always say in Law and Order? You are innocent until proven guilty. I learned that as a kid watching Law and Order. Mm-hmm. So Marcy's Law takes that away. It takes away our constitutional right to due process. It's a terrible law. We need to mobilize around this issue so that next year it does not gain any traction. Right now it's just a resolution, but I, again, don't really trust our legislators. I think if there is a big enough push, this can actually become a bill, and if it passes a resolution in the Senate, the bill may come out of the Senate.
Right.
Are they citing any specific types of crimes that are being the stimulus to creating this sort of law, or?
Well, and this is the interesting thing about this. They're stating that, it's traumatic for the victim to have to be deposed. Another part of Marcy's Law, another aspect of Marcy's Law is that if let's say that you're having a bail hearing or any court hearing that the defendant has to go to, the law, in quotes because it's not actually a law, would require the prosecutor to notify the victim. So if you are the victim of a violent crime, you may not, and this is what their rallying cry is, that we are trying to protect victims of violent crimes. Well, some victims of violent crimes don't want to participate in it. They don't want to they don't want to be reminded that I've been violated. So this law takes that right of, and this is a right of the victim to decide, hey, I just don't want to be bothered with this in that manner anymore.
Just let it be over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's their rally cry, is that we're doing it for the victims, violent crime, victims of violent crime. But some victims of violent crime just don't want to be reminded day in and day out that they have been victimized.
It kind of reminds me of sexual assault cases where people say, if you have to confronting your accuser, it can be kind of a difficult situation. And there is a weird fine line there where I totally understand where that can cause anxiety, and that could be a big deal for somebody who's been a victim of sexual assault. But on the other hand, again, like you said, it's the bedrock of our criminal justice system, and people have rights, and people are falsely accused all the time, and you need to make sure that people are protected from false accusations just as much. So
it is a fine line, and you can see both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And we as libertarians, we're always looking at the unintended consequences. I think above and beyond anything else, we always look beyond the text of the law and see how it's going to affect. I know the other parties, when they're in the middle of fighting the battle on the ground of Team Red, Team Blue, they don't always look to the end result of the unintended consequences. Mm-hmm. And really the big thing here is, I don't want anyone going to jail that isn't guilty. And that's a potential problem with Marcy's Law, because the more people who are excluded from the process, the more likely that could occur.
That's right.
For those of you who don't know, Ryan is a candidate for PSC 3. Congratulations, Ryan. Running for office is a big step.
Yeah.
There are a couple of bills specific, and I'll let you decide what order you want to talk about them. HB 189, which is a bill that would allow municipal power companies to raise rates to offset Plant Vogtle cost. And there's also one that's similar, that's SB 355, which is a bill that sunsets the Georgia Nuclear Energy Financing Act. So go ahead, talk about either one of those or both.
Yeah, no, I'll just knock out both of them.
Okay.
Then 355 is actually a great one. They got it passed. The Georgia Nuclear Energy Financing Act was passed basically to help Georgia Power finance Plant Vogtle. So they're building 2 new nuclear reactors at Plant Vogtle. It's 3 and 4. There's already 1 and 2 there. I don't really take a stance on nuclear necessarily. From what I've seen, it seems like a good opportunity to be more green. But that's not really the point of this. Basically, the reason they sunsetted it is because Georgia Power has already charged their ratepayers $2 billion based on this act. And the project that they're funding with it is already 5 years behind schedule. It was initially expected to cost $13 billion. They recently went through and got it reapproved for $25 billion.
So double, basically.
So double.
Okay.
And this bill would basically, it allows them to charge ratepayers for the life of the project, and it also allows them to profit. So Georgia Power is sitting there. Right now, if the project plan goes to the $25 billion, $5 billion of that $25 billion, and that's with a B, everyone, I keep saying it because it's with a B, it's a very large number, is profits for Georgia Power on construction of a capital project. Right?
$5 billion in profit on a $25 billion.
That's right.
That's pretty good return on the money.
That's right. And it's before the nuclear power plant is even operational. Before they even flip the switch.
Okay.
Correct. So this year, the General Assembly said, we're not going to really let this happen again. Everyone kind of admits that the whole project's a boondoggle, well, except for the Public Service Commission and Georgia Power, but that's another story. Everyone kind of understands that it's a boondoggle and needs to be ended. The problem is it's a sunset, so it allows Georgia Power to continue with Plant Vogtle. If you go and look at your power bill, if you have Georgia Power or a number of municipal agencies, you'll see that you got a nuclear recovery fee. So that's what this bill would sunset and not allow any other companies to do in the future. And that is starting as of January 1st of this year, so it is done now. But you're still going to be paying for Plant Vogtle. HB 189 was originally it was HB 924, and you'll hear a little bit more in the future when Brent talks about another bill about this concept of zombie legislation. But this was basically the same thing that will be described. It was a bill that didn't make it out of committee, and it at that point it was supposed to be over. But another bill made it out of committee, passed the floor of the House, and when it got to the Senate, they basically gutted it and replaced it with the innards of the other bill that didn't make it out of committee. I don't understand all the parliamentary rules that allows for that kind of thing, but I think they should be called out every single time they do it, because it's obviously hiding things. It's obviously them trying to get something over on voters and them trying to get something over on their fellow congressmen. So this is sort of the same thing. So HB 189 was one of those bills that made it over crossover day. They gutted it. They filled it with this. And it was a bill that would allow municipal power companies to raise rates, essentially, to help offset Plant Vogtle costs. So they sunset this bill that makes it they're financing it in a more explicit way, and basically all they're doing is trying to hide it now. So they just raise the rates instead of charging the nuclear recovery fee, and it helps them to essentially keep their profits. So it was tabled. So
Apparently somebody else didn't like it either,
and that's a good thing. So
excellent.
Yep.
So as I mentioned before, libertarians tend to look for the unintended consequences of legislation, and one of the bills I submitted is SB 315, which is the computer crimes bill. Now, if you've ever had your identity stolen, or you've ever been the victim of malware or a virus, you know deep down inside how much it just pisses you off. Okay, when you had your computer trashed, so the initial reaction there is this is a good thing. SB 315 is it is direct legislation because of what happened at Kennesaw. Kennesaw had a break-in. For those of you who don't know, they had a break-in to the voter system. Now, no voter data was taken, because it just so happened the person who broke in was what we call a white hat, someone who was actually a researcher who found out that you could get in and you could do things inside the computer. Well, Georgia did not have legislation that dealt with just breaking in. You had to commit a crime. So breaking in was not a crime. You had to actually get in, steal the data, or do something with the data to commit a crime. So what they've done now is they now have made it a crime to get in illegally at all, which, your first thought is, well, yeah, that's a great thing, except no, it's not a great thing, because here are those unintended consequences. The people, there are groups of people out there who are researchers, and they, of course, as we bring on more computer equipment, and as we bring on more programs, and as we bring on more software, infinitely there'll be holes. It just happens. Mm-hmm. So there are white hats and black hats, good guys and bad guys, and they call themselves researchers, the white hats, and they actually go out and they try to break into computer systems, and they do it because they're testing vulnerabilities. In Georgia, that's now a crime. So if you find something like that, now you're faced with, what do? I can't report it, because if I directly report it, I've now committed a crime. If I'm going to have to find another way around it in order to get that information, because it's important. So that's one of those unintended consequences. The security part of it is great, but now you've created a situation where, beyond researchers, everyone's a criminal, but even now a researcher's a criminal. So again, legislate. And I actually reached out to my senators and the head of the committee, and a couple of my peers. We discussed it with them, and they didn't see the problem with this legislation. So unfortunately, it did pass. So we'll now have to see how those unintended consequences go in terms of how the bill goes. Let's see.
I know other companies like they'll hire those white hat guys though, and then talk about. They'll say like, I just need you guys to just hit our system, and like I don't imagine that's illegal based on this. As if you're authorized to do so.
Yes. If you hire someone and it's private.
Yeah.
This is more if I'm on a white hat team and I decide to poke around.
Yeah.
And find something poking around. Before that wasn't illegal if I found something. Now it is illegal.
Well, I'm not sure. So imagine you have your yard, right? Your yard has a chain link fence around it, right? You've got an acre or so.
You've tried to secure it.
And in the back left corner, you've got a hole in your fence, right? And so you have a guy that comes around and he double checks for holes in your fence without your permission. And he goes in and you just find him in your backyard wandering around. Are you happy about that? Right? I mean, did he break a law? He did, actually. He's trespassing, right? The fence actually says that is basically saying you don't want anybody on your property, so there's legal precedent there.
Right.
So it's trespassing.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm kind of on, well, so to speak, on the fence on whether or not I'm upset about this bill.
Well, I think if you look at it in the sense that it's going to curtail.
Yeah.
It's going to curtail people who are willing to go out and find vulnerabilities now and charge them with a crime.
Yeah.
It's a crime. So if I came to your house using your same scenario, if I came to your house and I stepped inside your fence and realized, hey, I could get in there, I might want to go back outside and walk around the front and tell the guy, that, hey, you got a hole back there in the fence, and I'm a good guy, but a bad guy can get in. I can be arrested now. Thanks, Ryan. You just had me arrested because I was swell enough to tell you that a bad guy can get in the hole in your fence.
Yeah, that's true.
So from that standpoint, that's where I have a problem with it.
Yeah. That guy probably wouldn't be arrested today, honestly.
No.
Yeah.
No, he wouldn't be.
But he might be in this situation.
Well, in this situation, I think you put a target on whistleblowers.
Yeah.
In that sense.
That's true.
Especially if they find out. I mean, look what just happened with the city of Atlanta and their crypto, the crypto virus that they received and the ransomware. So, those things. I mean, it's a constant attack on systems.
Yeah.
Constant attack on systems. Tim.
Yes, sir.
Let's see. We're going to go to SB 369.
Oh, now I really like SB 369, but not in the sense that I actually like the law. I just like that the state, the government, and it's
let me read the title. This is back. I wanted to. Let me read the title to you. This goes back to what Tim said about legalese. Okay, here's the title of SB 369. Revenues collected from fines and fees, payments to peace officers, annuity and benefit fund, fees collected in criminal and quasi-criminal cases prior to adjudication of guilt, provide. All right, Tim, break that down for us.
I love how they always put it backwards.
Right.
So the verb goes before all of the subject. And it's like Yoda or something, I'm like,
exactly. It's awesome. It's awesome. All right, Tim, tell us all about it.
So, back in the day, if we can go that way, Ryan and I had a conversation about something similar like this happening here in Atlanta. I don't know how we came about it. But it ended up, one of us called the city jail and spoke to a really nice lady at the city jail, and she told us about all of these fees that one has to pay if they're ever arrested. And we were like, wow, the city makes a lot of money from these fees. But, my mind says that if you are found not guilty, that you should be reimbursed these fees. Well, the nice lady on the phone said, no. If you get arrested in the city of Atlanta and you go to a city jail, there are a lot of fees that you have to pay. So one of them is that there's a 15% fee for general cases and or 20% for traffic offenses must be paid. These fees are for city jail and driver's education training funds. The amount of $3 per offense must be paid at the time bail is posted. Said all of that to say this. This new bill now requires that you have to pay $5. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it's money that is being stolen from you. That inner libertarian in you that exists in all people must be screaming at this moment to know that.
Well, and when you add it to the other 10 fees.
So I don't know if you recall this, but we did the math, I believe, on this. I don't know if we did it together or I just did it on my own. I don't know, but I did the math on this. I know there are numbers somewhere on our Slack, somewhere in the interwebs. There is math, and it's like, my gosh, the city, this bill incentivizes the cops to arrest you. And not only does it incentivize the cops to arrest you, here's what it does. It goes to the peace officer annuity benefit. Oh, wait, no, that's not the $5. The $5 go to a pretrial diversion fees. Oh, I'm sorry. So let me read my notes because I'm getting so excited. I'm getting all my fees mixed up. I got to get all my fees right. So here it is.
There's a problem right there. I have to get all my fees.
I know there is a list.
There's a problem right there.
So let me refer to my notes. So it says requires $5 of pretrial diversion fees be given to the peace officers annuity and benefit fund. Let's just take a moment.
Let that soak in.
Let that soak in.
Oh boy.
Every time the cops arrest you, you are now helping to guarantee that they have a parachute when they retire because it goes into their annuity fund. How have we not taken to the streets, people, that the city, that the state is requiring us to now pay for the retirement of the cops by arresting us? Mind blown. I don't understand this, but yet this was passed. And this is what why I believe the public policy team is so important, is because a lot of these things pass and people aren't aware of that. But between the public policy team and our partnership, we're trying to get the word out that we need to be more cognizant of what's going on because this is absurd. $5, and that's how they get you. They get you with these small fees, but when you do the math, and you got to do the math, you're like, my gosh, this really adds up. So,
and even when they're passing the bills, they say, well, it's only $5.
Right.
And other congressmen are like, it's only $5.
And it's probably millions of dollars if you think about all the over a period of time. If
well,
you think
and again, they implemented 10 fees, so it's $55 is really what it is, you know?
So here are the other fees that the state charges. So at the time, though, this posted an additional fee of 5% if base bond is $100 or higher for peace officer annuity benefits. So they're already making 5% if your bond is 100% or higher. That's already going into the retirement fund for the police. Then there's an additional 10% for police and prosecutors training fund. So we are now paying the police to learn how to better arrest us so that they can earn more money.
In retirement.
In retirement. Oh.
Awesome.
Oh.
Awesome.
That is awesome.
But that's not it.
But there's more.
There's more people, more peeps, more. Sit down for this one. 10% goes to the Indigent Defense Fund.
And what's that?
Well, if you're poor and you need if you need counsel to be provided for you, there you go.
Oh.
Okay, so isn't that a good thing?
I mean,
wait, what's the percentage?
10%.
10%. So 10% to prosecutors and police, $5, which who knows what percent that is going to the police as well, and then 10%
to the public defenders.
To the public defender's office.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Now,
prosecutors are already usually paid, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay.
But right. I don't know. Perhaps it's just me in my tinfoil hat. I think I would much prefer not to be arrested. Therefore, I wouldn't have to be responsible for becoming indigent, for paying for my defense team.
Especially if you went to jail for jaywalking or something.
Well, piggybacking on civil asset forfeiture, right? That story that you told, I think we discussed it. There was a guy, an immigrant, I think he was in Camden County. He was carrying around $40,000 because his significant other, they were breaking up and it was his money and whatever the case was, he didn't want her to take it.
Really?
Right.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
So in situations like that, where your money gets jacked already, how the hell do you pay for an indigent fund? I mean, really
Yeah.
crazy.
That was my lawyer money.
And now it's
took it.
Now it's been forfeited.
That's right.
Yeah, it's now in lockup.
Yep.
Crazy.
So is that? Yeah. Well, gee, Tim, that sounds awesome. It's great to know that every time we're arrested, we're going to help the cops retire. Ryan, HB 764 actually is a good thing.
Well, I don't know. It's a mixed bag to me.
Right.
I'm not super into it. This is the one that has to do with medical cannabis in the state of Georgia, which I still will not admit we have even an inkling of. The way the law works right now is you can have possession of, if you're on a list, right, you got to go get registered. You can have low THC CBD oil, and it has to have a THC content of less than 5%. There is no way to actually get that drug. So you can have it, but you can't get it. There's no cultivation law. And anyone who brings it in from out of state is actually committing a crime, even in the state of Georgia. Not only is it a federal crime, it is a crime in the state of Georgia. So there's no way to get it unless you are a sitting senator like Alan Peake, who is able to receive a nondescript box. He doesn't know where it comes from. He says, I'm doing air quotes for everyone who's listening in. He doesn't know where it comes from, so nobody can press charges, but he's allowed to get it and give to his constituents, which I think is a wonderful thing he's doing, but it does show the disparity in Georgia between the haves and the have-nots, because if I did it or Tim did it or somebody else that wasn't a sitting senator, we could go to jail for it, but a sitting senator talks about it in the AJC, and and that's all fine and dandy.
Everybody's okay with it.
So
because it's him,
right? And so that shows a big problem with the way that the law is applied in and of itself. So HB 764 goes through and says that you can actually adds PTSD and intractable pain to the list of treatments, the list of treatable diseases that you can have for the low THC CBD oil. But it still does not provide for any sort of cultivation. And again, it's the low THC. People that are in the movement understand that THC is actually necessary for proper treatment. It actually opens up the receptors in your body and allows the CBD to be more effective. There's a lot of science in there. We'll probably have somebody on to talk about it someday, but now's not the time to get into it. As everybody knows, the Libertarian Party's for full legalization, recreation, don't really care why you're doing it, but you should be able to treat yourself for this. So the reason I say it's a mixed bag is because there's no cultivation. The other thing that I don't like is it establishes a committee to explore cultivation options. And to me, I think that's just a delay. So all that is we've been talking to them. The LP's been talking to them. Folks in Normal have been talking to them. Local folks.
What is Normal?
The National Organization for. I'm not 100% sure where they are off the top of my head, but they do cannabis legalization activism across the country.
Right.
The local chapter is called Peachtree Normal.
Got it.
And so they do it. Local people just go in and support this stuff. They don't need a council. Just Google it. Just Google it. I mean, you can go on to the U.S. Health website, and they'll talk about treatment of cancer with cannabis. If there's no known medicinal purposes, then why are you guys talking about it in treatment of cancer, right? That's right there on us.gov, whatever.
Right.
So that's why there's a big deal there, and we need to get that fixed.
Right. So what's the couple of things? The Committee to Explore Cultivation sounds a lot like let's figure out from the state of Georgia how to...
I just want to break in real quick. It's the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
Thank you. There's our Mr. Producer.
Voice of God over there.
Yes, that's right. So the committee, anytime, the interesting thing about the legislature is they love study committees because they will literally study something to death. But it sounds a lot like they're looking for a way to, in the event we get cultivation, let's say 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they're looking for a way to either monopolize it or control it.
That's true.
Which would be just as bad as what we have now in the sense that, it'll still be high priced. Right. There'll still be a limited amount of supply.
Right.
And
that's why regulate and tax is not a good solution to this, because regulate just means that a company like Marlboro, or probably going to be a tobacco company, is going to come in and they're going to control the entire market, and I still won't be able to grow a plant in my backyard because Marlboro has the monopoly on it, or 10 companies have a monopoly on it, and
Right.
I'm not allowed to produce.
Right.
So
what are the when might we see some cultivation? Is there any time frame that you're aware of?
Yeah, so they put a timeline on the committee, which is actually a good thing. It's in December of this year. They got to have it wrapped up, but they're only required to meet, I think, 3 times between now and December. So who knows what they're actually going to learn? Who knows what they're going to do? The timeline is a good thing, and I'm sure the activists in Georgia are going to be reaching out to them and making sure that the right people know the right things. But it just doesn't feel very good. I'm not very confident that cultivation is going to come out of this. The good news is Nathan Deal said that he would veto anything that came across his desk related to anything that looked like recreational at all, and cultivation sort of feels like that, and he's going to be out. So
maybe the next governor will have a shot at convincing that governor.
Hopefully.
Tim, SB 452, which is a bill that I have listed as in process. Here's another. Let me read the title of this bill so you can your eyes can roll back in your head. Criminal procedure and penal institutions. Peace officer to take certain actions. Verification that a suspect is illegal alien require. Tell us all about that, Tim.
So this is a very sad bill. It's terrible. So what this bill requires that if you are arrested, go through trial, when you get to the sentencing phase, the prosecution is required to check your immigration status. So if you are an undocumented immigrant here in the States, the prosecutor is required to notify Homeland Security and or ICE or any other similar government agency. And here's the kicker. If you are arrested and you go before the judge and the court has a bond schedule to release you on your own recognizance, the prosecution still is required to find out if you are a documented or undocumented individual and to report you to ICE if you are undocumented. So let's take that last part. If the judge is able to release you on your own recognizance, you can still be deported with if this bill passes. This is another bill that we're reaching out to everyone and imploring everyone to, especially this year, get in front of your elected officials and let them know that this is terrible legislation and that we don't want this here in Georgia. It's terrible for our economy. It's terrible for just individuals and families. It's just a gross, criminally vulgar bill.
Well, and like we've talked about before, is people who are accused of victimless crimes. You want to talk about like jaywalking. It's an arrestable offense in Georgia. So let's say somebody who's Hispanic, who's undocumented, is here in Georgia, and they jaywalk, and a cop sees them and says, "Hey, I'm gonna go get that guy." Because I tell you what, I've never been arrested for jaywalking, and I've jaywalked in front of a ton of cops. But a cop can look at that guy and say, I'm going to arrest him right now. And based on this law, he's going to go in, he can look up all of his records, and he can report him to ICE and have the guy deported for crossing the street in the wrong place. And, maybe he is not here illegally, right? But, like, if he's not committing any crimes, any violent crimes, I say let them be here, let them be part of our culture, let them be part of our community, and let them contribute and give them a pathway to do that. Don't just put them in a cage and round them up, and then when we get to them, we send them back wherever they're going. I don't think that's the right way to treat human beings.
No, and I think there's an excellent balance between the people, and I use the phrases that everyone uses, living in the shadows, just call it what you want, okay? Mm-hmm. If they're here, and, I'm going to use illegal in air quotes, okay? Because people who are here illegally, some of them are here through no fault of their own, the DACA crowd. How do you, where are you going to deport someone to who's never known anywhere else? Where are you going to deport someone who's been everything that we would want out of a U.S. citizen except for paperwork.
And overwhelmingly, these people are that.
Right. Right.
So,
I mean, yeah. We listen. We hear about all that. We hear about the exceptions. We hear about the criminals. We hear about the horrible things that people do. But guess what? Citizens are doing the same horrible things as well. That's not an excuse that's not to excuse away the crime. The fact is, on per capita, they're a lot less likely. They being people who are undocumented are less likely to commit those crimes.
Well, and the same thing with like Second Amendment. We talk about that right now with the shooting and all that. You can't punish a few people for the crime, or you can't punish the whole of a people for the crimes of a few, right? So if somebody goes out there and there's some violent criminals who are also illegal immigrants, you can't then say all illegal immigrants are violent. That's not fair, and you wouldn't want to be treated that way. So
Right. Excellent
Golden
point.
rule.
What's the status of SB 452, Tim?
So it passed the Senate, but it's stuck in the House. And this was a great disappointment to our Lieutenant Governor, Casey Cagle.
Yes. He was rooting for this one to get out of the House.
Well, he's been big attacking Decatur for the sanctuary city practices, which I think that's even pretty loose. I don't think they're doing too much of anything.
No, I agree. All right, so we're going to wrap this up with something that I don't know if it's unique to Georgia or any other municipality, but we're going to title this Zombie Legislation. There are zombies.
Wait, is Rick Grimes involved?
Not yet.
There are zombies roaming the halls in the Georgia legislature, and no, they're not your legislator. These are bills that, through what I would consider legislative shenanigans, managed to come up, die, come back up again, die, come again. So I'm going to give you one example. Believe me, there are more over the years, but this is just one. So HB 660, which was the Georgia hate crime bill, got absolutely zero traction this year. It was the hate crime where it would take a certain crime and elevate it to a hate crime, which, as libertarians, we hate that.
Yep.
There is no crime is crime is crime. There's no quantifying it. There's no taking a group of citizens and making them more of a criminal than someone else. So HB 660 got zero traction. SB 373 was a bill that was introduced. It was the judges of the Superior Courts, the 11th judge of the Superior Courts of the Cobb County Judicial Circuit, appointment of such additional judge. Basically what this bill was Cobb County wanted to have an additional judge. Fine, that happens all the time. Turns out the clerk in Cobb County miscounted. So they didn't actually need that judge, but that bill did pass.
Yeah.
So what happens here in Georgia is we have something called crossover day, and that's basically halfway through the session. And what happens is any bill from either the House or the Senate, has to pass out of that house and be submitted to the other body to be voted on. If it doesn't make crossover day in that session, it's dead, meaning it just lays there and nothing happens to it. Well,
they can pick it up the following session, though.
Correct. It's good. It's good for 2 years, basically.
Yeah.
It's good for 2. They can pick it up the following session if it hasn't had its 2 year. But in this 40-day period, it's deceased for all practical purposes. Well, what happened in the case of this zombie legislation is, since SB 373 was passed before they realized that other judge was unnecessary, it just sat there, and it had no one's going to do anything with it because there had no reason to send it to the House at that point. But HB 660 was offered as a substitute to 373. So if you want to go online and look these two bills up, just for your own purposes, you will see that the language in SB 373 is identical to the language in HB 660. Now, that in itself is horrible enough, but what's worse is if you wanted to find out as a citizen about the status of the hate crime bill, you would look at HB 660 and say, okay, awesome, it didn't get out. But what you don't realize is the SB 373, the judicial appointment bill, which has nothing to do with hate crime legislation, is now being sent over to the other body, and you can't search and find out anything. You don't even know who to call. You don't have any idea. And this is one of the, again, like Ryan said earlier, I don't know what parliamentary tricks that they have to use to get this done, but basically this happens frequently where they will take one bill that is passed. And see, the really bad part about this is they broke their own rules, because HB 660 didn't make crossover day. But they take it and stick it in another bill that was approved, and now it can go to the other body, and it can be voted on, and it can go to the governor's desk, and it can be passed. And we'll have hate crime legislation that no one got to have a public hearing on, no one got notified, no one got to object to, nothing. And that, unfortunately, happens. Like I said, that's happened a few times.
That other bill I was talking about earlier, HB 189, was exactly the same situation. So
Right.
They were just trying to hide it somewhere.
They try to hide it.
It get passed, and in my case, it didn't, which was good.
Right, right. And in this case, 373 passed. So, it's, I do not know if it was voted on, by the House, but it did violate all of their own rules, and yet they have no problem doing that. So that is our legislative wrap-up for 2018 for this session. Thank goodness that the legislature has adjourned.
Yep.
So we can all grab our wallets and our liberty and and know that we're safe for the remainder of this year. I'd like to thank Ryan for being here.
Yep.
And certainly I'd like to thank Tim as well. And, thank both of you gentlemen for your work on the Public Policy Committee, because, we really have to have, we have to be the watchdogs. Somebody has to watch these guys.
Yep.
And it's been an interesting process watching, how the legislature works.
Yep. Right
now, go ahead, Tim.
I just want to give a shout out to our newest member of the public policy team, Dr. Dana, who is also the chairperson for the Libertarian Party of Atlanta.
Yes, cool. Thank you for that.
And I would love to talk about, Public Policy Committee is doing a great job doing activism on behalf of legislation and making sure that people are educated. We also have 3 candidates who are running for State House, Patrick Marcacci, Jay Strickland, and Damon Kennedy in 42, 52, and 90. So if anyone's interested in supporting them or volunteering, you can come out to lpgeorgia.com and sign up to volunteer.
And lpgeorgia.com, between now and the next legislative session, we'll be putting together a pretty sophisticated legislative tracker that's going to allow us to really keep up with bills as they move their way through the process.
Oh, so now I'm on the hook.
Yeah, I just put you on that. I just totally called you out there, Ryan. So
this
attention.
Is my pet project. Now I'm on the hook for it.
Hey, you got till next January.
That's right.
You got a few months. So you got an election coming up here soon.
Yeah.
So thanks, gentlemen, for attending. If any of this sounds interesting to anybody, feel free to visit us at www.lpgeorgia, spell the word Georgia out, .com. And we look forward to having you all on our next session.
You've been listening to the official podcast of the Libertarian Party of Georgia. The theme song for this episode was Metaltania by Kevin MacLeod, released to the public domain through freepd.com. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to rate us and leave a review. You can email the show's producers at podcast@lpgeorgia.com. If you're a libertarian in the state of Georgia, don't forget to find your local affiliate at lpgeorgia.com.